I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this cute little car next to me is the new GWM Ora. If you're watching this video overseas, you might know this car better as the Ora Funky Cat. Ora is a brand that sits under Great Wall's structure in China, but here in Australia, they obviously have decided that GWM has better brand value, and so Ora is a model of a Great Wall car here in Australia. But what this vehicle is one of the most affordable new electric vehicles on the market. It's not quite Australia's cheapest electric car. The BYD Dolphin, which hasn't come out yet, and the MG4, which does launch this month, are both a little more affordable than the Ora, but it's not far off. The one I've got with me here is the extended range, which has 420 k's of claim range, but not quite that much in the real world, as I'll show you in today's video, and it's about 47 grand drive away here in New South Wales. But you can get into an Ora for quite a bit less than that if you're happy to really minimize the amount of range you've got, say if you live in town. Now obviously the aesthetics are quite unique for this car, but in today's video I'm going to take you through the interior, the practicalities, the running costs, and we'll take a drive in the GWM Ora to see whether it's a vehicle that should be on your shopping list if you're looking for an affordable electric runabout. But before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. This is actually my second crack at attempting this GWM Ora review. There wasn't anything wrong with the focus. We didn't rub Vaseline on the lens last time. The difference is that between my first crack and today, GWM has massively slashed the price of this car, and price is so fundamental to assessment when you're road testing a vehicle. So of course we had to come back and look at the car again in light of its new pricing. Now, that's especially the case for the standard range version of the GWM Ora, which still has the same interior that you see here on the extended range. Its price has been cut by almost $5,000. Why? Well, it's because of the MG4 and the BYD Dolphin, which both came in and undercut the GWM Ora on price even before this car has been able to launch here in Australia. In response, Great Wall Motors has basically taken a scalpel to drive away pricing across Australia, which has resulted in a pretty affordable entry grade, and then this extended range is just over 47 grand drive away here in Australia. So with that in mind, how does the Ora stack up? Well, certainly it stacks up better than when this spec was 2.5 grand more expensive a matter of days ago, especially when you consider that if you don't need the bigger battery, this is now a pretty affordable car to get into. However, you should also check out vehicles like the MG4 and the Dolphin to see whether the interior styling and the exterior styling and the way they drive also suits you better. But here in the Ora, I quite like what they've done. The interior materials are relatively nice. You get this sort of neoprene style soft dashboard, what feels to be maybe a leather steering wheel, maybe it's vinyl, it feels good enough. And the seats themselves look quite plush. They've got quilting up top, they've got sort of a faux neoprene or Alcantara in the center, and nice stitching, apart from this one where the stitching has started to actually come off the seat. The problem with these chairs is they are not supportive, especially for multiple hours in the saddle. You can really tell that GWM designed this car to be a city car first and foremost, where you're getting in and out of it quite often. There's basically no bolstering on the seat, so you kind of slide around in the car. Now, another thing that's changed since the first time I reviewed this vehicle is a whole bunch of bugs in the tech have been fixed by way of a software update. It didn't have Apple CarPlay, the time zone was stuck in Europe and you couldn't change it. That has been corrected. We now do have wired smartphone mirroring. The time is correct, but there is still one problem, and that's that bizarrely, you can't reset the trip computer in this car when it comes to energy efficiency. So in some ways, the technology still feels a little bit weird and unfinished in this vehicle, but most of the time you get along with it okay. One thing I love is these toggles down here for some of the climate controls, but you do still have to change the fan speed and the temperature by going through the touchscreen, which is a bit of a reach away, but it looks really pleasant in this binnacle up here. Storage space is plentiful, loads of room down here, wireless charging next to you, and a deep bin under the armrest. Ooh, that also has a Freddo frog. Not sure if that's an attempt at bribery, but I do like a Freddo. And the door bins as well, they are big enough to take a medium-sized water bottle. So up front, it presents quite nicely. I do think the MG4's seats are more comfortable, even if its interior materials are not as opulent as this vehicle. But let's check out the second row. As you can see, despite its diminutive size outside, the second row is actually pretty generous on the Ora. I've adjusted the driving seat into my position. I'm 6 foot tall, and legroom is excellent, toe room is good, headroom is excellent too, and you could even fit someone in the center if you really disliked them, because there is a seat belt but the seat itself is super narrow and a really high perch. Thankfully, the outboard seats are reasonably supportive, but not quite as good as the MG4s in that regard, but life back here is okay. Not a huge amount of airflow though, no rear air vents, so you are relying on the people in the front to crank up the fan speed so you get some oxygen. We do have a USB port, it's an old school one for some reason in 2023. We've got map pockets, but the material quality does take a bit of a decline here in the back. However, I like the fact that we do have a flip down armrest, we do have a soft armrest here, so you know, for an hour or two in the back, the GWM Ora is going to be totally sufficient. But huge back seat, something had to give in order to make this car really small, and that's the boot. Moving around the back of the Ora's rotund rump now, this is certainly one of the most unique looking vehicles on the road, and it is really small and easy to park, but that does mean that it also has a very small boot. Only 228 litres, which is one of the smallest on the market, and I think you can see just by looking at it, it's highly compromised. You might get a medium suitcase in there, you're going to be better off with soft bags, but for something like some school bags or a grocery shop, of course you're going to be able to get it in there without too much of a problem. And you can also lean forward and drop down these back seats nice and easy, get rid of that privacy shelf, and you're good to go. Now underneath the boot floor, no spare wheel, just a goo kit and a compressor. What can you do? But the tailgate is at least very easy to close. Next up, how much range are you really going to get from the GWM Ora? Like every single EV we test, we've put this car through our independent Chasing Cars highway and urban range test to see how it really goes, because GWM claims that this vehicle uses 14.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers of electricity for a range of 420 Ks. Well, we almost got that in town, where we recorded 14.8 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks urban for a range of 400 kilometers around the burbs, and that's pretty good. It didn't fare quite as well on the highway though, where it was less efficient than we expected. We got 17.9 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks for 331 kilometers of highway range. And given this vehicle is called the extended range, that falls a bit short of my expectations, especially because we say here on Chasing Cars that we expect minimum highway range of 350 kilometers for EVs. Now in terms of charging, you can charge this thing with a DC charger, but only up to 67 kilowatts, which is really slow in 2023, but it does have an 11 kilowatt onboard AC charger. And at the moment, GWM will even throw in a wall box for your home with this car, which is about $1,695 of value, they say, so that's quite a nice discount. Also discounted is the servicing. You do have to service this car every 12 months, which is a bit shorter than some rivals, but it's only 99 bucks per year for the first 5 years, and that is really cheap. Lastly, the warranty is 7 years with unlimited kilometers for the vehicle, which is good, or 7 years, 150,000 kilometers if you're going to use it for commercial purposes. So what is the GWM Ora like to drive? Well, as I mentioned before, what we have here is the second of 4 available grades, and this is the extended range with a 59.3 kilowatt hour usable battery and a single motor on the front. So even though this is a dedicated EV, it's a front wheel drive platform rather than a rear drive platform that some rivals are starting to use, including the MG4. But the motor is very, very similar to the one used in that car, at least in terms of output. 126 kilowatts of power and 250 Newton meters of torque is, to be honest, sufficient in a vehicle like this. The Ora is an EV, so it weighs a bit more than a combustion vehicle of the same size, but it's still very, very light for a full battery electric vehicle, and 250 Newton meters of torque in particular keeps this vehicle feeling zippy really all of the time, and you're never in a situation with the Ora, apart from perhaps like very high speed overtaking, where you think that you might be able to use a little bit more shove. And of course there are plenty of cars out there on the market which do that. Perhaps something like a Cupra Born, which has 170 kilowatts of power, but that car is 60 grand, not 47 grand drive away as this one is. Now you also get an extra kilowatt of power compared to the MG4, but that wasn't quite enough to pip that vehicle in the 0 to 100 km per hour sprint, which we managed in 7.15 seconds in independent testing of the Ora extended range. Still, that is quite brisk for a small car of any type. And when it came to braking, the Ora returned a result of just over 36 meters, which again is fine for the segment, if not quite as good as rivals. And ultimately, that's kind of what the driving experience in this car comes down to. The Ora is relatively tidy to drive, without ever feeling like it's been given that final polish. The steering, for instance, is probably a little bit slow for a vehicle of this segment. You are finding yourself putting in quite a lot of rotation to the tiller in order to get the result that you're expecting, particularly when the rest of the dynamics of the vehicle actually feel relatively brisk and quite sporty at times. The slow steering is a bit counterintuitive, but again, like anything, you do get used to it. The ride is a strong suit of the Ora. It's relatively soft and plush and supple, and I think that's what most people are looking for in this segment. But you can find the limitations of the chassis quite quickly. Now, I don't think anybody is out here suggesting that the Ora is meant to be a hot hatch or drive like one in particular, but when we're starting to see some real innovation in this segment, particularly once again from this car's arch rival, the MG4, which is really more than competent, actually very engaging and enjoyable to drive, the fact that the Ora merely achieves a good enough standard in that regard is, you know, it's fine. It feels like that classic 7 out of 10 experience, which is going to suit most people just fine. As a cute little runabout that's, you know, quite cheerfully styled, and it's not too big, not too small, I think the Ora hits most of the right notes. And, you know, it's also impressive to see that GWM's cars continue to get better and better in the way that they do drive and in the perceived quality. They're probably not quite yet at the same level as rivals, but every single one we test seems to get better and better in that regard, and the Ora also follows that trajectory. Now, refinement is okay, but things do start to get noisy on coarse chip roads, which is very, very common with cheaper, smaller EVs like this. Grip levels are fine, but we have these GD contact tires here, which is a cheaper tire than what you're going to get on some rivals. So once again, the limit of grip for the chassis and the tires does come up a little bit faster in the Ora than in some rivals. Now, the safety systems, there are plenty of chimes running through the car, but interestingly, after the most recent software update, it is a little bit quieter in this vehicle and less intrusive as you come towards the center line. So I think there has been a bit of a push that's gone through in order to make these systems feel more intuitive, and that's great. But we do have adaptive cruise control and AEB as well, which is good to see, plus a lane centering function. Now, in terms of my recommendation, I'd probably just go for the smallest battery version of the Ora. I'd probably prefer to just drive this car for what it is, which is a cheap and cheerful EV. It looks kind of cool. Its driving manners are pleasant and calm, but you don't really want to outlay a huge amount of money on this car. So I probably wouldn't be too interested in the Ultra or the GT versions of the vehicle just yet. Maybe if they had a bit more power or the chassis was just amped up to the next level of sophistication. But for now, I think the standard range Ora does stack up. And if you test drive that car, you test drive the Dolphin and the MG4, and then maybe also an EV from a brand which is maybe a bit more expensive, something like a Hyundai Kona electric or a Cupra Born, and I think you'll know which of these cars suits you and where you see value for money in particular. So those are my initial impressions of the GWM Ora. This car is pretty cheap for an EV, it's fairly cheerful, but its biggest problem is simply the MG4, which is even cheaper than this car and also usefully better to drive. It also has more range, particularly if you go for the models with bigger batteries in that car. Now, this particular GWM Ora, being the extended range, is as long range as it gets right now, and it doesn't quite cut it for us as an extended range vehicle for use on the highway. Now, of course, I can already hear the comments being written. This thing is a tiny pint-sized city car, and of course, that's fine. But because this one does have the bigger battery, we have higher expectations of it. That being said, at about 47 grand drive away, you could certainly be spending much more money on this from an electric car from a more established manufacturer. With this new wave of more affordable EVs coming onto the market, it really pays to shop around and find one that's going to suit you best. That being said, the Ora has plenty of upsides, long warranty, really charming and cute looks if this sort of thing appeals to your tastes, and a reasonably nice interior. Plus it rides pretty well too. Keen to know your opinions, so please let me know down below this video in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.